James Edwards III of The Athletic dropped an article today on the Detroit Pistons that really gave some insight into what's going on with the Pistons and what we could possibly see this offseason. I think there's a lot of gems in here. We have to talk about it in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Later on, we'll break down even more from this article from James Edwards III of The Athletic. Is there too many cooks in the kitchen for the Detroit Pistons? And then even later on than that, Chauncey Billups is going to the Hall of Fame. We'll talk about that. Great for Chauncey. We'll break that down a little bit. Well, let's go ahead and dive right into this article, man, from James. I think I encourage every Piston fan to go get the Athletic subscription and read this article. I think it's just a mailbag article, but he says some things in here, and you need to read in between some lines, try to put some things together. I think this is some real insightful stuff and some real gems inside here. Also, I'm recording this at halftime of the Pistons game. Cade didn't play in this game. And after watching the first half, if I waited to the end of the game to talk about that game, I would have ended up making some crazy statements that probably would have got me in trouble with some of you guys. You guys probably would have got mad at me. Oh, you're being too harsh. So we'll wait for another day with that. So let's dive into this article from James. So, like I said, it's a mailbag where he's answering questions from the fans. And one of the questions, the very first question is there any sign of change coming in the front office? And honestly, I don't know where to start because I don't want to just ruin the whole article that James wrote because you guys should be reading it yourself. But I don't know where to start with this. I guess the first place I'd start with is his answer of, will they change, basically, will they clean house completely? And basically, without ruining the whole article, one of the things that James says, I think the most interesting sentence he says in this answer is this right here. Quote, along with some other decision-making things that have taken place behind the scenes, might have Gores not make Weaver the sole scapegoat. If you go, and again, if you read this whole thing, if you read this whole thing, you'll see what he means by this. Another interesting sentence right before this one is, quote, when discussing whether Troy Weaver will be fired, he says, quote, for example, head coach Monty Williams has to own his fair share of responsibility for how the season has gone, and Gores made it very known last summer how involved and invested he was in bringing Williams to Detroit. I read this stuff, and I think without coming out and just blatantly saying it, it sounds like something that I feel like most of the fan base knew. Weaver was not the one pushing for Monty Williams. I know they had that press conference when they hired him. It was like, hey, I'm on board with it. Like everything we've heard since then from the beat writers, from reports outside of Detroit, is that this was not what Weaver wanted. And this is something that I spoke to at the end of last offseason, something I had heard. It's not that Weaver was just like, oh, if you hire Monty, I'm done. I'm out of here. But he had other choices that he wanted. And this was not necessarily a push that Weaver made. And now after this season of how bad Monty has been, it looks like, at least it feels like, after reading this article and watching this season and knowing the things that I know, it feels like Monty is the one really being singled out here. Because again, it sounds like that this was not a Weaver push. This was a Gores push. And now Gores is having to come to terms with, I may have messed up here. And something else that James mentions in this article that I mentioned at the beginning of the year, I kind of hinted at it. I didn't want, I'm not in the business of reporting stuff, I kind of hinted at some of this stuff at the beginning of the year, but now that James has reported it, I'll come out and say it now. James says in this article that Tom Gores basically would not be scared of eating the contract of Monty Williams. He would not be scared of eating that money. The money will not be why Monty Williams is not fired. And if you guys remember at the beginning of the year, if you guys listening to the podcast, I hinted at that many times. A lot of people kept asking me, why isn't Gores making a decision? Why isn't Gores doing this? I kept coming on here and saying, guys, if I'm telling you, if he thinks Monty's not doing a good job, he will get Monty out of here. Like, Monty will be gone if they don't feel like he's doing a good enough job. I couldn't just come right out and say, hey, it's because, he doesn't care about the money. I wasn't, I'm not trying to do that. But now that James has come out and said it, I will. That is something that has been kind of, well known behind the scenes, that the money is not what's keeping Monty here. Like, if they think Monty's doing a bad job and that he needs to go, he will go. Like, the money will not stop that. So I think for the most part, and again, I'm not going to reveal the entire article because you guys need to read it yourself. But from the most part in this article, it seems as though James is saying, without putting words in his mouth, that if there's someone if there's going to be change, it sounds like it's going to be at the head coaching position. It sounds like it's going to be at the coaching position for the Detroit Pistons this year. Just to quote James a little bit more in this article, he says, quote, yes, I'm well aware that Gores handed Williams a blank check and owes him a lot of money over the next few years, but I've also gotten the sense that Gores isn't against not only forking over the cash to relieve Williams of his duties, but also publicly admitting his mistake in the process if he feels that a new coach is needed sooner rather than later, end quote. That's not something you guys have killed the beat writers, whether I don't think it was fair, but fans have killed the beat writers for not criticizing the organization, for not straight up saying what's happening with the organization. Fair or not, that's something that the fans have said. James and Omari have been very public and have been very straightforward with this type of criticism. I don't think you get this writing. You don't get this a few months ago. James doesn't write this and put this publicly out there for fans if there's not a reason behind it. The beat writers would not go out there and put this out there if there was not a reason behind it. It sounds like if anyone is to go, if there's going to be change in the Pistons organization, it sounds like it's going to be with Monty Williams as head coach. Now, again, James said in the article, he's not saying 100% this is all going to happen. Obviously, nothing's 100%. But again, just reading the tea leaves and reading between the lines, this is what it sounds like it sounds like here. This is one of the last things I'll quote from this article. Again, there's just so much in here. You guys have to read it. There's no way I could go through all of it. But here's a paragraph here that I really think is really telling here. James says, quote, part of Weaver's downfall over the last 2 years is the frugalness to improve the roster. There haven't been many big moves made. There was a bit of false confidence in how quickly the Pistons' young players would improve. Surely that will have to change this season. However, as for Williams, part of his downfall this season is prioritizing the likes of Killian Hayes over Jane Ivey and things like not staggering Ivey and Cade Cunningham until it was too late in the season. These are all things you'd expect a coach who is being paid that much money with Williams' experience to address sooner than he did. With that said, I wouldn't be surprised if Williams' seat is hotter than Weaver's despite the financial commitment. Again, if you read even more of this, it just speaks more and more. All I'm getting from this article is that it's likely, I think it's probably likely, if I had to bet, that Weaver sticks around in some capacity and Monty's gone. It sounds like Monty has worn out his welcome in the Pistons organization through 1 year. And he's worn it out with the fan base. I'm going to be careful here. I'm going to guess that he's worn his welcome out with players. I'm going to guess that. Some players. And it seems like he's worn his welcome out with the front office and the organization. Because I'm telling you this right now. Again, when the beat writers come out and say stuff like this, I need you guys to read in between the lines and take it for what it's worth. They have a job to do. And along with their job, they can't come out and just bash the organization nonstop. You can't do that. So the fact that they are openly doing this, and James, this is like the third straight article James has come out and really bashed Monty Williams, I would say. Really come at Monty. Straight up, not hidden, not beating around the bush. No, he's just straightforward going at Monty. And the things he says in this article, he would not be saying this stuff if he didn't feel confident that head coach would not be here next year. So I think that this article, again, was great. And I think it gives a lot more insight into what the Pistons are going to do, what it sounds like they might do. And I think if you read this, I think it does nothing but just. I think if anyone gets hit the hardest out of this article, it's obviously Monty, and I think he deserves it. Monty deserves all the criticism he's gotten this year, not just from the Pistons fan base, but from the beat writers, from outside Detroit like other NBA fan bases, the NBA community, national media, like everyone has. Oh my God, I accidentally hit that. Everyone outside, like literally everyone watching the Pistons has criticized Monty, and he's deserved it. And according to this article, after I read it, I feel pretty confident saying that if I had to bet money, I don't think Monty's here next year. Now, maybe that changes. Maybe they don't want to admit their mistake this early. Maybe they don't. Maybe something changes. But I feel confident betting money that Monty probably won't be on in this organization next year after reading this. That's how I feel. So let me know in the comment section down below if you guys did read it, how you guys felt. What's your guys' takeaways? If you haven't read it, please go read it now because, again, it's amazing. I think it provides a lot of insight. When we come back, we'll continue breaking some stuff down from this article that I thought was really insightful, and we'll ask the question and break it down. Are there too many cooks in the kitchen for the Detroit Pistons? We'll talk about that when we come back. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date with all the latest in the world of sports. That includes March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Absolutely trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV today. Now I got to tell you about another one of our sponsors, FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Again, a few years ago, I was new to this whole scene. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to, test out the betting market. I went to FanDuel, downloaded the app, and I haven't turned back since. I still use it to this day. FanDuel is absolutely amazing. It's self-explanatory, easy to use, and a ton of fun stuff to do over there on FanDuel. So again, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a big win. I promise you, you won't regret it. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Again, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a big win with FanDuel. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So the question that I'm going to ask, and I'm also going to answer here, and I'm sure it's a question that a lot of Pistons fans, especially after reading this article from James, are probably asking themselves. And I know a few fans, a lot of people were even asking this before the season. And it's, is there too many cooks in the kitchen for the Detroit Pistons? And when I say that, what I mean is there too many people involved in the decision-making process? Are there too many people voicing their opinions in the front office? So the quick answer, I'd say, is yes. That's the quick answer I'd give. And to reference what I'm talking about here is, I want to get the exact quote here. James says in this article, quote, however, when talking about Weaver. However, as of right now, the likeliest scenario to me is that Gores and company, and the fact that he said Gores and company, not Gores, but Gores and company. Gores and company hire someone in the president of basketball operations, team president role, who will be above Weaver and have the final say on roster decisions, leaving Weaver to still be involved, but not necessarily have the final say. We'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll come back to that in just one moment. Then James goes on to say, quote, the other question you're probably asking yourself is, why would Gores even consider running it back or keeping Weaver on board after this season? It's a fair one to consider the season that is about to conclude. I do, however, think Gores feels somewhat responsible for some of the downfalls this season. For example, head coach Monty Williams has his, and this is a quote we said earlier, has to own his fair share of responsibility for how the season may have gone, and Gores made it very known last summer how involved and invested he was in bringing Williams to Detroit. That along, listen to this, that along with some other decision-making things that have been taking place behind the scenes might have Gores not make Weaver the sole scapegoat. We'll see, though. Again, like I said, this article really gives you a lot. Yeah, I mean, so first off, I would not agree with the decision to just bring in someone above Weaver. If you're going to make a change, make an actual change. Move on from Weaver. If you don't want to get rid of Weaver and you want to give him another season, then let him have another season where he's actually making the decisions. Because all this sounds like to me is the only reason why Weaver's not already gone or a sure thing fired, like he may be fired anyways, like he not ruling that out at all. But the only reason why it doesn't sound like it's a sure thing is because there's other people that feel like maybe they should take some of the blame for it that maybe Weaver didn't even decide to do. And who knows what exactly the decisions. I may have an inkling on a few that I'm not going to come out and talk about now. But it seems as though, according to James and some of the other things obviously that's been reported throughout the season and some of the things I've heard, that maybe Weaver hasn't had the final decision on some of the things that have went on with the Detroit Pistons. Now, does that absolve him from blame? Absolutely not. I'm not absolving him from blame at all. The reason why I'm saying that is, if that's the reason why you don't want to just flat out fire him, then just keep him as GM and then give him an offseason, excuse me, where he's able to just make every decision, where he's able to actually make the decisions himself without having to worry about Tom Gores, without having to worry about Oren Tellem, without having to worry about whoever else. I know Ed Stefanski isn't really involved in the organization at all, from what I understand. So I'm not going to say him. From what I understand, he's not involved at all, really. But I don't know anyone else that could potentially be in the kitchen that he needs to answer to. So if it was me, I would clean house completely. I'd clean house of everyone and just bring in a whole new regime. But if that's not what they want to do, if they want to give Weaver another season, what's the point of giving Weaver another season if you're just going to bring someone in to add another chef to the kitchen that he has to answer to, and then Weaver's not even actually making the final decisions anyways? What's the point? I don't really understand outside of, I mean, it seems like Gores doesn't want to just straight up fire him. It sounds like, from reading those quotes and some of the other things that was said in the article, my takeaway in reading between the lines is Weaver hasn't done a good job. Gores knows this, but Gores also feels like that maybe he has to do with some of the reasons why Weaver hasn't done a good enough job. So now he feels bad and doesn't feel right just flat out firing him, because he thinks if he fires him straight up for it, it kind of be messed up because some of the decisions wasn't really on him as well. So if he's going to fire everyone responsible for it, he might have to fire himself too. So instead of just firing him, he'll say, you know what, we won't just fire you. We'll keep you around. But we're basically going to take away your responsibilities of being able to make the decisions here. You're not going to make the decisions, but we won't just flat out fire you because we know it wasn't all your fault. So we'll keep you around a little bit. Me personally, I think that's walking around the bush too much. Like, I understand that maybe Weaver didn't have complete control over everything, but he did have control over a decent amount of stuff. And his opinion was taken into account on a lot of stuff. Still, like, he's the GM at the end of the day. If you want to move on and you want to bring someone else in, just clean house completely. Just clean house completely. That's what I would do. Just clean house and bring in a new regime and start anew. which I do think it's interesting. This is another thing, and we'll talk about probably another day. I'm not going to dive into it yet, but I do think it's interesting. I was just thinking about this the other day that, if it's possible that Weaver and Williams are around next year, like these rumors about who's going to stay, who the Pistons prioritize the most, which young guy do they like, which one they don't like that doesn't even matter because the people we're referencing that they like and do like maybe won't even be here next year. Like those guys making that decision won't be here next year. So the new regime that comes in, like we'll have to find out who they like and who do they prioritize. Like all this stuff we're hearing now may be irrelevant, which makes me feel like that maybe the reason why we're hearing that stuff and people are reporting on it and we're getting like inklings on it is because not everyone is going to leave. That it is going to be at least a little bit of people just coming back and running it back to where their opinions will matter. And basically they'll bring in somebody that I won't say just walks in line with them, but maybe falls along a little bit of the same ideology. That again, we're not going to dive too deep into that, but that's just something I was thinking about, I think yesterday or so. But yeah, I do think the Pistons are dealing with too many cooks in the kitchen. I think James basically coming out and saying, I mean, not basically, he did when he said that along with other decision-making things that have happened behind scenes might have Gores. Basically what you're saying there is Gores has been behind the scenes making some decisions or impacting some decisions. Arntellum is behind the scenes impacting some decisions. And it's not all Troy Weaver. So it shouldn't be just Weaver taking the blame for it. That's basically what that's saying. So if that's what's going on, and now you're thinking about adding someone else to it to then oversee Weaver, that you're just doing too much. Yeah, you're doing too much. And I think that's how you get here. That's how you get to this point. If you want to move on from Weaver, get someone to bring in and give them full control to let them make their decisions. Now, I do want to address this, and then we'll move on to Chauncey making the Hall of Fame, because that's great news. But something I do want to make clear to the listeners, and this is something I know for a fact. Every front office in the NBA doesn't just have one person just speaks and everyone else just walks in line like, yes, sir, yes, sir. Like, that's not how it goes, okay? Every front office, they have people they turn to like, hey, I'm thinking this, how you feeling? And then they go back and forth. But at the end of the day, the GM still makes his decision. Like, every front office, yes, they have their trusted people that they'll be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? You think it's cool? Okay, I'm doing it. Like that. But that it doesn't seem like it's just that. It doesn't seem like, according to all the reports we've heard and the things I've heard behind the scenes, it doesn't sound like it's just one of those, hey, I'm thinking about trading for James Wiseman. You like that? Okay, let's do it. I'm doing it. Like, it doesn't, that's not what's happening. It sounds like that it's like there's been a few things that maybe Weaver just flat out wasn't a fan of doing, but that happened anyways. That maybe he wasn't totally against, but if it's up to him, something else would have happened. So, look, I think we said this during the losing streak. There's blood on everyone's hands after this season. There's blood on Tom Gore's hands. There's blood on Artellum's hands. There's blood on Troy Weaver's hands. There's blood on Monty Williams' hands. Heck, there's blood on some of the players' hands too. Like, the players could have been better. So I think I honestly feel like if they go the route of maybe bringing back Monty, even though I don't feel like that's going to happen. I truly don't feel like that's going to happen. But if they do, if they bring back Monty and then get rid of Troy, or get rid of Monty and keep Troy, or get rid of Monty, keep Troy in a lesser role. Like, if you do any of those options, I feel like you're really just prolonging the inevitable, which is you're going to end up firing them anyways, and you end up starting over again. So get it over with now. Get it over with now. Start anew. And like James said this in this article as well. And yeah, I'm going to suggest you guys to go read it all because there's a lot more that I didn't hit on. But he says this here, that a lot of the people in the Pistons organization feel like they got the hard part out the way, and they're right. They got Cade. Everyone feels like Cade is that guy. He's the only positive to this season. You got the hard part out the way. So you can start anew. You can get a new regime that comes in and builds this team in the image to let Cade lead this team and give him the best chance to do it. You got that part out the way, and it's early. He's not even off his rookie contract yet. If there's ever going to be a time that you start over / retool, it's right now. It's right now that you do it. You have to do that. This would be the best time. Doing it after he's off his rookie contract and on his extension, that right there is how you get a guy to ask out and guys leave. That's what leads to it. So if you're going to do it now and get it right. So a long way around it. Yes, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, in my opinion, and bringing someone in just to oversee Weaver basically and make the final decision would be a mistake. Just get rid of everybody if that's the route you want to go. And if you don't want to go that route, then give Weaver the offseason to actually make the decisions all for himself. And we don't have to hear about a year from now, well, Weaver didn't want to do this, but kind of had to. And now everyone's wondering, well, who made that decision? Was it Arn? Was it Weaver? Was it Gores? Was it, like that? That's too much. It's like you don't hear about this kind of toxicity in this kind of environment in any of the great organizations. That doesn't happen. Like this kind of toxic stuff doesn't happen everywhere else. So that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter @Kukio. We went really long with that segment. But again, this article it has a lot of stuff in it. I'm for the 100th time suggest for you guys to go check it out and read it for yourselves and tell me how you guys feel about it. And what you guys think the Pistons are going to do this offseason now, based off of this. But when we come back, Chauncey Billups, Mr. Big Shot, Chauncey Billups is going to the Hall of Fame. I'm so happy for him. We'll talk about it even more when we come back. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply, and now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Visit Robinhood.com/boost today. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel @Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Chauncey Billups, man, has made the Hall of Fame. He is going to the Hall of Fame this offseason or this upcoming Hall of Fame cycle. I am, first of all, I want to say I'm extremely happy for him and extremely excited for him and to see this because I was a little concerned, I'm not going to lie, that he would make it. I didn't know if they would get him in because Chauncey, and we recorded an episode about Chauncey, I think like 2 years ago, when people were trying to say that Sadiq Bey was a better shooter than Chauncey and the best shooter in Pistons history, which is what might have been one of the more disrespectful things that I've ever witnessed in the last few years with the Pistons. Looking back on it, I'm like, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen the Pistons community try to come up with. But anyways, Chauncey, he was ahead of his time. Advanced numbers did him justice. He was uber efficient ahead of his time, taking pull-up threes, efficient from each part of the floor. He just didn't do it on high volume, and he sacrificed stats for wins to do it on a winning team. And the Pistons won a ton with Chauncey. 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals, 2 NBA Finals berths, a championship, a Finals MVP. I've said this numerous times in the podcast anytime Chauncey comes up. Chauncey would be one of the best players in the NBA today if he played in today's NBA. He would be one of the best players in the NBA. He was one of the best players during his time. Go look at how many times, go look at each season where he finished in MVP votes during his prime with the Pistons. Look where he was ranking in MVP totals during his time, during his prime. He was getting that type of love. Chauncey was freaking fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And if it wasn't for him sacrificing for the ultimate prize of winning, he would have put up numbers that others could have put up. The amount of, I'm telling you now too, if he played in this era, and we did this on the episode 2 years ago, I should try to find it and link it below. But if you look at the volume of threes he was taking versus compared to his time, he was taking more threes than others. If he played in this era, before, LeBron and JJ on their podcast the last few weeks have talked about this over and over and over again. And they've even referenced Rip Hamilton coming off floppy action with 2 bigs on each block. Where do you see 2 bigs on each block anymore? Where do you see many 1 bigs on a block? Like, a lot of it's 5 out. A lot of it is spacing. And a lot more threes get jacked up. If Chauncey played in this era, and I promise you he's getting at least 10 threes up a game. Like 9 to 10 threes up a game, and everything's shooting up for him. I'm glad that he's getting this recognition because he's one of the best shooters that we've seen. He's one of the best players in Pistons history. He has a Finals MVP. He has a championship, and his numbers would have been even more crazy if he chose that route. If he chose the route of going numbers over wins, but he didn't, and it translated to wins for the Detroit Pistons. And this is the last thing I'll say. People always say that 2004 team, that going to work team, had no superstars. They just had a bunch of really good players. And to this day, I will say for the rest of my life, I don't care what anyone says, that is a bold-faced lie. Chauncey Billups was a superstar. Chauncey Billups was a superstar player who sacrificed for the rest of the team to win championships, to win and get to the NBA Finals. He did that for that. If he didn't, he was a superstar type player. I think years later, with Ben Wallace being in the Hall of Fame and now also Chauncey, I feel like that's kind of showing itself that whole, the Pistons only had really good players. They didn't have no stars. That's BS. Ben's in the Hall of Fame and Chauncey's in the Hall of Fame. Both those guys were legit stars, and they're both Hall of Famers. And they deserve their respect, and they're getting it. So I'm really happy for Chauncey. He was one of my favorite players. He's what got me into the Pistons, him and Rip. Rip with the mask, Chauncey with the clutch shot, Mr. Big Shot. Those 2 guys is what really got me into Pistons basketball when I was younger. I wish I remembered more from their time. I wish I could remember watching full games, but I was just too young to remember it. A lot of it, I wish I could. But Chauncey is great. I'm happy for him. So another Piston goes to the Hall of Fame from that 2004 team. I think that's probably going to be it from the 2014. I don't think anyone else is getting in. But those 2 guys were the most deserving, and they got in. So happy for them. Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter @KukaHill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel @Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. And until next time, peace out.